Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here again. I was so hesitant the first time you guys invited me to come in and I had such a nice time and I learned so much about myself um, doing the last sermon and it was a really good experience for me and I really appreciated it. So I didn't hesitate at all this time, even though I didn't know what I was going to talk about. But everybody I figured this is a nice place to be vulnerable and share some stories that have ruminated with me during this pandemic. And, as hopefully we're moving out of this and into this back to normal place, um, you know, I've been questioning a lot of what is normal and what do I want to bring with me from the pandemic, some of those things that I think gifts that we've really gained. And some of that is those moments of reflection that we had in those quiet days. And, there's definitely part of me that really longs for those early days of the pandemic where, we're cuddled at home and, that sheltering in place idea that was so scary at the time. But, when I look back, I think that some of the best moments that my family had were during those and getting to know each other and support each other and really holding on to each of those moments. And it got me thinking about what are some of those soul stories that we carry with us. And so I went back to look at something that I had written right before the pandemic. And actually, I was supposed to be presenting this performance piece that I had done in Seattle on the day they closed everything down in Seattle. And it was one of those things where we all went back and forth, like, are we presenting? Are we not presenting? And what does this exactly look like? And we all still already had hotel rooms and they weren't. So we still went over there and got to see each other. And that was pretty much my last time out in public and in kind of a big way. We ended up not doing the presentation. And then last night at the Kids in Concert fundraiser, it was my first time going to what I would consider a big event, something with more than about 25 to 40 people there. So this one was much bigger than that. So it seemed like a really nice way to start. So the sermon is actually adapted from a poetic prose that I had written for a performance about what home meant to me. And I was performing with 3 other Indigenous people. And I wrote it just before the pandemic. And I was traveling for my tribe 3 to 5 times a month, often to Washington, D.C., to share our stories and to, in the way that we hold the federal government accountable for their treaty obligations, and in a way to make sure that we strengthen and maintain our sovereignty. And when I was writing this piece, it really allowed me to reflect on how I carry home, the idea of home, of Suquamish, of this land, of my kids with me when I was away from home so often. And so during the pandemic, it dawned on me that it was about so much more than just carrying home with me, but also how I carry and balance my own soul stories. I was a mental health counselor for a number of years, and I do plan on retiring from tribal council this next year after my 3rd term ends, and I'll be moving back into doing mental health counseling. And to prepare for something like that, I want to make sure that that I'm dealing with the current issues that I have. And so this idea of soul stories has propelled me to learn a lot more about myself and kind of have some of those uncomfortable conversations with myself that are really important on my journey as I get older, as I'm, solidly in middle age now and really enjoying that piece of my life. So I'm going to talk a little bit about soul stories here. And I wanted to start with a definition of what soul stories are. And in lieu of writing my own definition, which feels like another step and a big step in my journey, I want to share one that I found actually on a website called Soul Stories, and it's the artist's name is Tam, and she's out of Australia, and I really like the one that they came up with. Soul stories are insightful creations that capture the sensitive and vulnerable pieces of our soul. They are written and illustrated from the heart, allowing you to remember how every ingrained and forgotten moment can be turned into something beautiful to feel. I'm not sure that they're always beautiful to feel, but I think that it can be a beautiful process, not in a beautiful to look at, but a beautiful feeling that sometimes is a really sad place to be, and that sometimes we carry stories that feel like too much, and sometimes our stories are just so hard. And part of our job as a community is not only helping ourselves learn how to do that and carry those stories, but to help the kids in our community be able to do that, to be able to carry the story of the environment and the land that we're on, the trees that we're with. So here we go. Salty air, wind through the trees, earthy dirt smell, raindrops and raindrops turning into storms, sunshine glittering on the Salish Sea, dogwoods blooming. This is home. Since time immemorial, this is home, where I raise my children, where I am a daughter, a niece, a sister, an auntie, a councilwoman, where I feel my ancestors around me. Home. I am a story catcher. I catch stories everywhere I go. They come to me or I draw them out. They bind me to that place, that person, that adventure, that object, gift, moment. These stories snuggle into my breasts. They tuck into my pockets. They curl into my hair. They tickle my toes. And some of them, those really precious ones that are really heavy to carry, the ones that are soul stories, they settle into my jewelry. I come from a long line of strong matriarchs that pass jewelry and accessories down through our families. Many bold pieces, some subdued pieces, all with stories in them. I love hearing my mom tell the stories of where she received her jewelry and the places she wore them. I love trying them on. I remember as a girl watching her, and it was the final thing she put on, and then the first thing she took off when she got home. Being a story catcher led me to being a storyteller. Stories need to be told. Stories are, in fact, oral traditions, oral histories, cultural insight. It's my job to know when and where they need to be shared. It feels so big. It feels like such a large responsibility. As a tribal councilwoman, I hold the stories and I tell some of them in very colonized spaces. It's part of my tribal leader position to tell our stories as part of advocacy. Colonized places are not welcoming, and they have been deadly for our people and often still are. They tried to kill our homes and they nearly succeeded. But we did not leave quietly. We are still here. We are resilient. We are wise. We collect those stories and told them in very hushed spaces to each other. We also told them to rocks and shells on the beach, the moths hanging in the forest, and the moon. Oh, the moon, she holds them all, putting a star in the sky for each story and ancestor as our celestial librarian. The morning brings adventures, new opportunities and challenges, and new stories to gather. And whether I wake up at home or on travel, the one morning ritual that is most important to me is adorning myself with jewelry and accessories. Necklaces, rings, belts, shoes, hats, scarves, and earrings. Oh my gosh, the earrings. I have a story for each of the pieces that came to me through my grandmothers, my aunties, my father, my travels, my sisters, the Instagram artists that I follow, maybe a little obsessively, and I'm really proud to pay full price to these artists. My mother, the old Coyote sisters and family, my grandfather, my friends, my cousins, garage sales and Goodwill. Treasures are everywhere, sparkling new or waiting to be brushed off and renewed. Home. Some days these jewelry and accessories go on like the sweetest kiss, the familiar smell of home and optimism and kids laughing and birds singing. But some days it goes on like the heaviest armor, like Wonder Woman's gold cuffs or Joan of Arc's helmet, and chainmail, heavy chainmail made of ancestors' love, heartaches, and scars. I love my clothes because they are a canvas for my stories. I often buy clothes because of how well they'll show off my accessories. When I wear a dress I often pick is a jersey knit dress. It's really comfortable and a higher neckline and cinched at the waist and draped skirt. It was all made it felt like just for me, just to showcase some of my favorite pieces. Some of my favorites, they're my favorites for a myriad of reasons. Nostalgia, power, boldness, prettiness, artist, construction, color, symbolism. My cedar hat. This is the hat that I asked my friend Toma Villa to make because I wanted a cedar version of the hat that Beyonce wears in the Formation video. Dentilium necklace. Tala. Dentilium used to be used as our money system, and it was called Tala. And I always like to say it with my friend Bryna's attitude. The way she said it was always felt very powerful and fun, and the reminder of that money can be both of those things and that power has to be held really carefully. I try to find shoes that make me feel really powerful, that make me feel fierce, especially when I'm walking through the halls of Congress. And I love the way they kind of announce my coming as I'm fighting patriarchy, as I'm fighting for my people, as I'm maintaining the strength of our sovereignty. I have a beautiful woven wool belt, and it was made by an incredible master weaver and hereditary chief, Bill James from Lummi. And it's actually a tumpline. For those people who don't know, a tumpline is something that you wear across your head, and it attaches to a basket that you're carrying on your back. And it's used to carry heavy loads in that basket. And I could just never think of a better metaphor than to wear that as a belt as I'm going into some of these spaces, or as a way to celebrate and remind myself that there are still burdens, but there also I'm collecting these beautiful light stories that make me radiate joy and happiness and kindness. I have a beautiful cedar bracelet that I wove all by myself, and I was taught by Celeste Miller about 10 years ago, and I love putting it on. It's the lightest one, and I actually couldn't find it this morning. It's the lightest bracelet, but it's got so many little woven spots to be tucked into. And then one of the things I learned during the pandemic from my boyfriend was this process of making Viking knits with silver. And one of the things I really liked about it was that, number one, I got to make it myself and learn something new. But it also has all of these beautiful weaves that I wish I could show you closer, but it's all these little spots for all these little stories to tuck into. Same thing with my hats. When you look at all of those little details, all of those places, they can be stories, and stories sometimes are really hard on my heart to carry because it's not always the right time to tell those stories. But I have to know when it is, and I have to remember those little pieces. And there's little baleen actually woven into this hat. So it holds lots of strength, it holds lots of power, it holds lots of fun, it holds a lot of smiles and compliments that I feel like help give it this nice resilience and give me this nice resilience. And then I have these beautiful earrings that Jessie Okayo made for me with these nice little, let's see, think of where my camera is. And so I always feel very bold when I put them on and they like clip into place and like are really sturdy. And so I like having these because then at the end of the day, I get to take them off because they're so heavy. And so I want to go back and talk about how I said the moon holds all of our stories. She does this beautiful thing for me, which is that at night she sings them back. And on nights when she beckons, and if you live here in Suquamish, you know what I'm talking about, when she just shimmers over the Salish Sea, the moonrise from Suquamish is just, I don't know that there's anything comparable to that. And my kids and I are like, the moon is calling, and we just stop what we're doing and we run down to the dock so that we can see her. And when we get there, we're not the only ones there. There's so many people there. You know, when she's shining like that, I don't know what's bringing all the other people there, but we use it as a chance to share those stories with her. We call it chasing the moon, and we watch her shimmer on the Salish Sea, and it feels like an offer for her to hold the weight of some of these hard stories that we tell and that we hear. It helps me balance the burden of carrying hard stories, and it also gives me that larger power, that bigger power beyond me to share some of the good times with, to share what my concerns are, also what my hopes for the future are. A celestial librarian of soul stories. And so I want to invite you to think about what some of those soul stories are to you, some of the things in your life that are very well written into your soul, into your heart, into your body, and where you see them in your kids, where you see them in the trees. You know, what are you looking forward to, you know, when winter finally comes, when the first frost comes? And think about where we put those, and remembering that sometimes if they're hard stories, you know, we've lost a lot of people this last couple of years. We've lost traditions that we've had for many years, and that we don't have to hold those all by ourselves, that there's a greater power around us that will help us hold them. And that I love the idea that they settle into my jewelry, and they settle into something so that, you know, I can always pass those on to somebody else. The good parts and the powerful parts and those pieces of oral history, and the physical manifestation of that physical history, of that oral history. So today, I'm really grateful that I had this opportunity to share some of those things with you, and to get to, not only because I haven't dressed up too much during the last year and a half, that I was so grateful for the process of feeling the weight of all of those stories come with me this morning. And also to feel safe in a space to get to take some of those off, to share what they are, and then to take them off. And so when you're looking at carrying your own, I encourage you to find places to store them, to hold them safely, so that some of them maybe you don't have to hold as heavily as you have been carrying them. So thank you very much.